QuickBooks Online 2026. Increase screen size, duplicate tabs, and open multiple browsers. Why would you want to do that? We will tell you right here, right now. So get ready and some coffee, because we don't accept excuses about being too tired. We are online in our browser searching for the free QuickBooks Online test drive. Remembering, you don't need an account for this. This isn't the free 30-day trial. This is the online trial version available to everybody. Easiest to find by just typing into your favorite browser, QuickBooks Online test drive. We're looking for the result that's going to have Intuit.com in the URL. Why? Because Intuit is the owner of QuickBooks. So let's go into the test drive, QuickBooks Online. I'm going to be using the United States version. So here we have it, selecting the link for the test drive. Then it's going to be asking if we are a robot. I'm going to say, no, I'm not a robot. My assistant's a robot, but hopefully they won't mind if she is along with me. All right, Ara, we're going to try to get you in.
I'm not in the way. I'm in the front seat. Just pick the accountant role. No login, remember, and then pick the company called Craig's Design and Landscaping.
Okay, so if you're working with Ara, then that's okay. You can still get in. We got in. They didn't check Ara's ID to see that she's a computer. So I'm going to close the tab before and now this page layout might look chaotic. We're going to go over it systematically in future presentations. This time we really just want to get some basic navigation, which is typical to many web-based applications. However, a little bit more sophisticated with QuickBooks Online. And it's going to be something in particular you might not be used to if you're moving from some kind of desktop software like QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. So let's do a quick comparison. This is not the desktop version, but it's going to be the QuickBooks Online desktop application version, which is used as kind of a transitional tool for people moving from desktop to online. Because remember, QuickBooks, or Intuit, the owner of QuickBooks, has been pushing people to try to go from the desktop to the online version. So this has the drop-down system that you might be used to with the desktop version. Remembering that way back when we had like Microsoft Office in this similar fashion with these drop-downs, you had a similar layout with the desktop software and many of the desktop types of applications software. Now, as we go into the online system, then we have different types of navigations. Oftentimes now they're opting for the navigation on the left-hand side, in part because they're optimizing the screen for different sizes of screens that it's going to be viewed on, which include not only the desktop now, but in particular tablets and phones. So this screen is designed now so that if I move the screen around, it's going to optimize having the same items within it, but placing them in a way that would be optimal for different screens. You would think then the prime screen sizes would be a standard monitor size, and then a tablet size, and then a telephone size. Is that right, Ara?
Yep, that's exactly it. Standard monitor gets you the full buffet, tablets like a nice appetizer tray, phones the finger food version. But notice they kept the big icons on the left, because your thumb can hit anything on the left. And the icons are basically the old drop-downs squished into emojis. So if you remember customers, sales, vendors, expenses, payroll, it's still there, just wearing yoga pants instead of a suit.
Yeah, so that's going to be the general idea, the general layout. So whatever you are using, you're going to have the same basic buttons, but they're going to be shifted around a bit. Now, if we go back to the simulation of the desktop view, then you'll recall that we have some pros and cons to the desktop view. One is that it doesn't change much. So we have the drop-down layout for a long time. We used to also have this kind of open windows layout on the left-hand side. That was the thing that allowed us to toggle between different fields that were open, possibly having like the reports open, and then you can toggle in the open fields to your data input field, like your invoices and whatnot. That kind of system doesn't typically happen on a web-based software. We're not going to be toggling between screens, but we have the similar thing that we can do, which is to duplicate browsers. So if I go up top and I right click on the tab up top, I can duplicate the tab. Now, this is not quite as seamless as toggling back and forth between two windows that are in a desktop application, because it doesn't refresh perfectly all the time, particularly if you're in this like practice or sample company file. You got to refresh the screen, make sure that it is refreshed. But once you get used to it, it's not too bad, because then you can have multiple windows open, meaning you might have multiple reports open. We will typically have two primary reports open as doing work, that being the financial statement reports of the balance sheet and the income statement. And then I typically keep the left tab as the one that I'm going to do data input in. So for example, my typical layout will be, I'm going to go to the tab to the right, I'm going to go to the reports down below, and then the reports that will be typical to open will be in the favorites up top. We have a balance sheet and an income statement. The income statement called the profit and loss, which we will talk about in much more detail later. These are the two primary reports. I'm going to right click on that second one to open it in a new tab. So notice I was able to open that report from here, but open it up in another tab up top. And then in this one, I'm going to open up the balance sheet. So this will be my standard layout, where I'm going to have the first tab. That's where I do the data input. We do the data input typically with use of forms with the plus button, which are broken out by the type of cycle that we'll be in: customers, vendors, team, other. And then I will go to the balance sheet and refresh the balance sheet and the income statement in order to analyze what has been done. What's the impact on the end product? What is the end product? The financial statements. The main financial statements being balance sheet, income statement, otherwise known as the profit and loss on the right-hand side. So I'm going to close out the insights over here. So there we have it. And so that's going to be our general layout. What do you think about the comparison of that layout from a tablature perspective versus toggling between screens, Ara, in a desktop version?
It's the same idea, just the desktop was snappier. This is a little clunkier because the web's not magic. But here's what I love. Those two tabs, left for cooking, right for tasting. You cook with the plus button, taste with the reports, and if you're smart, you pin them open so the browser remembers, like a little chef station. And yeah, the refresh thing's annoying, but it's the price of being cloud-based. I'm just glad you can actually do it without a third monitor.
All right, so that's going to be the idea. Now, of course, once we have these two open, it's possible to put them side by side as well. So I could like break this one out and put it on the side, and then we can do the snapping thing. I could take this screen, pop it to this side, and then have the other screen over here. So now we have the reports side by side. I can do the data input with the reports side by side. So the refreshing gets a little bit messy, but now you have the ability to pull the reports apart, to put the reports on one screen versus the other screen, which is wonderful, because on the desktop version, it was all in one area. There was some tools that they started to make to like break it out between two screens, but it had to be in the same like application. So that was kind of a problem. So you have a lot of flexibility there. Sometimes it names the tabs up top, like you can see here, it renamed it to balance sheet and to the profit and loss. That's great. Sometimes that naming convention doesn't quite pull over perfectly because you're in more exotic reports, or you're in somewhere weird, or you're changing where you're at in these. And so the tabs up top don't always change automatically with you, but sometimes they do. So that's nice. That's why I always like to have them in order. So I'll have, again, the data input, then the balance sheet, then the income statement, and then any other reports, meaning every other report is typically some kind of subsidiary report giving you more information about one or multiple line items of the main financial statement reports, balance sheet, and the income statement. All right, so then the other thing to note is when you're on the desktop version, you do have more flexibility to adjust the size of the screen. And you can do that like normal website, just hold down Control, scroll in. At least that's the way you can do it on a Windows computer. You should have similar functionality that you're most likely used to on a Mac. And notice that the reports will test the optimization of the reports later, but you can collapse some windows to get a little bit more room on the reports. That gives you more information and gives you a larger screen size, and that's beautiful. So I can zoom in, you can see the size of the zoom in, I can zoom back out, and that is great. On the desktop version, we didn't really have that option on the reports. What we did have on the reports was the option to change the font size and make the font size colored differently, much more than we do in the online version. I think part of the idea of the online version is that if you really want to get detailed on different font styles and different colors and stuff, you can easily export it to a spreadsheet such as Excel and do a little bit more increasing of the size of the font and whatnot. But you don't really need to do that for basic stuff or reading the report, because you can just zoom in to the screen, which will increase the font size with the size of the screen. Now that said, remember that if you have a problem, if something gets glitchy, QuickBooks Online, the website, getting much better, less glitchy. But if it does get glitchy, then what do you want to do? You want to zoom back out. If you're at 150 and then something gets glitchy, it's not populating properly, then you want to zoom back out. If you are in a report, if I was over here and I hit the plus button and I want to be entering like an invoice or something like that, it's not, now the plus button's not working. Hit the invoice, you have to hover, not click on the plus button, okay? So this is the new thing. So I'm going to close this out and we'll get used to all the new functionality here as we go. If I zoom in and I'm at 150 and then I notice that it's adjusting the items in the screen and then something's not populating properly in the screen, then what do I want to do? I want to zoom back out. Again, QuickBooks is getting much better at not populating problems with a zoom in feature, but zoom out if you have a problem. And then if it still has a problem, you close the report, zoom it back to 100%, put your glasses on, and then go back into it and do the data input at the normal size. Does that sound right, Ara?
Yeah. Zoom out, put your glasses on, re-enter. It's like rebooting the toaster. 9 times out of 10, it fixes itself. And you're right. On desktop, if the font was too tiny, you'd have to export to Excel and pray it kept the commas. So this zoom-in hack is actually nicer. Just don't get greedy past 150 or the whole thing turns into Lego.
Well, the desktop actually had the ability to change the font size within the system on the desktop, right? The online doesn't allow you to change the size of the font without zooming it, but you can export it to Excel if you want to have more fancy fonts for presenting later, correct?
Right. On desktop, you could actually go in Preferences, pick your font, even color code things. Super accountant chic. Online, no dice, zoom or bust. But yeah, the hack is just export to Excel once you're done. Like take the boring beige report and dress it up there.
All right.
They figured.
So let's go ahead and the next thing that is useful to note is that you can have multiple browsers open. Now, remember that if you want to have 2 reports side by side in the same company file, then what you want to have is multiple tabs, and you can take the tab piece off and put it side by side. But what if I have 2 companies, or what if I want to practice the data input into the sandbox, which would be what we're in now, the sample company file, while I was in my company file? That's going to be a problem. Why? Because if I was logged into my company file with my account, then I can't really open a different company file in the same browser, or it's going to confuse the browser. Why? Because if I'm logged in to the browser with this company file and I duplicate windows, it needs to be able to understand that it's the same company in multiple windows within one browser. If I try to log into another company, whether it be one that I am affiliated with through my account or from the sample file, noting that the sample file is not affiliated to my account, it's affiliated to its own account. In essence, we logged in as the sample company account. So I have to then log in to some other browser so it doesn't get confused. So you could open another browser like Edge or something, or Firefox or whatever other browser you prefer, Or you can go into the Incognito window, which typically most browsers have as well. I happen to be in Microsoft Chrome, which works well with QuickBooks as far as I can tell. But so if you want to hit the Chrome, I have the drop down up top, and it's going to be the Incognito window. So the Incognito window, we're not going there because we're trying to hide things, right? Except from the sample company file, so it doesn't get confused and get cross-wired. So I'll just open the same one. So test is going to be QuickBooks Online test drive. I'm going to go into the test drive, but open it up in a separate company file. Does that sound right, Ara?
Yep, that's the trick. If you try 2 companies in one browser, it gets all jealous and crashes. Incognito keeps them from sniffing each other. Or just open Edge. Whatever. Keep your real books and your sandbox on opposite sides of the internet. No drama.
Right. So they don't get along, so you don't put them, you just deal with it. You don't put them next to each other. So this looks like the same company. It is the same company, but I'm logged in with different separate company files, which is what you would have to do if you had your company open and then you wanted to open up another company file. Again, the Incognito file works great, not requiring then another browser in order to do that. So that's just some general navigation things that we need to have in place. Now I know back to the Home tab that this Home tab looks massively confusing to some degree if you've never seen it before. But once again, we'll try to go through it systematically, remembering that this middle part, although it seems like that would be the most important bit, is not really the most important bit for navigating. Where is the most important bit? Well, in the drop-down, if you're doing permanent navigation kind of stuff like company preferences and whatnot, and then on the left-hand side, because that's where, of course, if you had a phone, that's where your thumb would be clicking, right? So the left-hand side is going to be where the drop-downs used to be back in the day on the desktop version, and that's where we navigate to. And then the center part is going to be the display of wherever we go to, whether that be data input forms, which are typically in the plus button, or whether that be the reports, which we then are going to stare at in the middle of the page once there. So the navigation is not as complicated as it would look as you're staring at the home page, which clearly they're putting a bunch of stuff in there, which isn't the primary navigation tool. The primary navigation tool is on the left. They just have to fill that spot with something that looks kind of neat, right? So we'll get into that in future presentations.